Have you ever felt the ground disappear beneath your feet because of a single sentence? Have you ever had the name you carry turned into an insult, spat out by a voice that once whispered, "I love you"? Well, that's exactly what happened to me that day. I wasn't in a courtroom nor in a confessional. I was just at the market pushing a cart with some fruit, bread and coffee. Simple things, the things of someone trying to get through life quietly. Until I heard behind me those words that cut the air like a cold blade. "Look at that old faggot." For a second, time stood still. The sound of cash registers, bags, conversations, everything vanished. Only the echo of the phrase remained, repeating itself inside my head. I turned slowly, my heart pounding in my throat, and what I saw made me forget even to breathe. Because the voice was his, the man who once slept on my chest, who cried that he loved me, who promised never to leave me. It was him. The same face, the same look, only now with an expression I no longer recognized. People stopped, some laughed, others pretended not to hear, and I stood there, holding the cart, trying to understand when love became an offense. It's strange how the world treats love between two people. When it's new, it's a sin. When it's old, it's a joke. I'd heard a lot of things in my life, but nothing hurt as much as hearing this from someone who was once my home. The air inside the market felt heavy. Every footstep echoed as if forbidden. The security guard looked, the cashier looked, even the bakery lady looked, but no one said anything. No one ever says anything when prejudice happens in front of them. It's always silence that does the dirty work. People's silence is what hurts the most. I wish I'd said something. Anything. I wish I'd had the courage to respond. But the words died before they could come out. Not out of shame for who I am. I'd left that shame behind long ago. It was for him. Because even after everything, a part of me still loved him. And hearing his voice spitting venom was like watching someone extinguish with their bare hands the fire you'd lit together. Our minds are cruel. They throw memories at you without asking permission. And there, between the sugar shelf and the cereal aisle, I went back years in time. I remembered the day we met, the first touch, the first laugh, the first honey whispered between laughs. I remembered how he looked at me as if I were the only truth in a world full of lies. And now he looked at me as if I were the mistake he needed to forget. As I tried to hide the trembling in my hands, I heard him laugh, a dry, forced laugh, as if to show the others he didn't care. But I knew that laugh. I knew the way his lips trembled when he was nervous. He always tried to appear strong even when fear engulfed him. But his fear was never of me. It was of the world, of what the world would think. And now it seemed the world had won. I could have left. I could have pretended I didn't hear, that I didn't recognize him. But I stayed, because inside me a voice still told me it couldn't be real, that maybe he'd said it to someone else, that maybe I'd misheard. But the look in his eyes belied me. And that's when I realized, sometimes the love of your life can also be your greatest mirror. He wasn't hating me. He was hating himself, and using me to do it. His body had changed, of course. His hair was now grey, his face was marked by the passage of time. But his gaze still held that same stubborn glow, the same one that made me fall in love with him so many years ago. And that was what destroyed me. Because behind the hatred, there was still the same man who once held me in the dark and told me his love for me was forever. But the forever of men like us has an expiration date. It ends when fear becomes greater than desire, when the weight of appearances begins to suffocate your chest, when the world forces you to choose between love and belonging. And in that hallway, surrounded by strangers, I understood that he had chosen to belong. The pain isn't what he said. It's what was left unsaid. It's the look that lasts a second and says everything my mouth will never have the courage to say again. I tried to speak, but he had already turned his back. He walked away as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't destroyed a part of my history with a single sentence. I remained still. I only managed to breathe again when he disappeared between the shelves. I felt a tear fall, and I hated myself for it, because no one wants to cry in the middle of a supermarket. But the tear came anyway, not of shame but of grief. It was as if love had died there, among the cans and plastic bags. And the most ironic thing is that, for a moment, I wanted to run after him. I wanted to ask why. I wanted to know if he really thought that, or if he was just trying to hurt before being hurt. But my legs wouldn't obey. I stood there, my heart aching, and the feeling that the past had returned to remind me that, no matter how much you try to bury it, some loves never die. They just change their faces. I left the market in silence, clutching the bag too tightly. The street wind was cold, but my body burned inside. Every step seemed to echo that insult over and over again. Old faggot. 2 words that on their own shouldn't have any power, but in the mouth of someone who once loved you, they became a knife. Sometimes life has a cruel sense of irony. I spent years trying to forget that man, and fate decided to put him back in my path, not to start over, but to test me. And the worst part is that, deep down, I knew that reunion wasn't over yet, that there was something behind that anger, maybe regret, maybe guilt, or maybe it was still love. And it was with this thought, this thread of doubt piercing my chest, that I returned home. Because what happened next was what truly changed everything. If you've made it this far, it's because this story touched you in some way. Maybe it reminded you of someone. Maybe it made you think about the times the past came back to test you too. And that's why I want to ask you something. Leave your like right now, because when you do, YouTube understands that these kinds of stories matter. That stories of love, loss, and courage deserve to be told, especially for those who have experienced the weight of time and silence. And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, sign up now. Here, each story is more than a tale, it's a mirror. A reminder that love, pain, and regret are ageless, and that we all, at some point, need to look back to understand who we are today. Oh, and comment below about how you're feeling so far. I want to know if you've ever had a reunion that disarmed you, that reminded you of something you tried to bury. Write in the comments. I understand the weight of memories because it shows you are not alone and helps this story reach more people who also need to hear what comes next. When I got home that day, I didn't know whether to feel anger, shame, or longing. I threw my keys on the table and stood there, staring into space. The sound of the clock was the only thing filling the silence. And that's when I realized how cruel time is. It passes, but it doesn't erase. I tried to distract myself, made coffee, turned on the television, but nothing held my attention. His image was still there, stuck in my mind. The same face, the same look, only now hardened. And even after humiliating myself in front of everyone, he continued to haunt me inside my head. It was as if my body still remembered the touch my heart wanted to forget. Hours later, my phone vibrated. An unknown number. Instinctively, I answered. On the other end, silence. Then a short, nervous breath, and then a voice I would never forget. "Do you still live in the same place?" My heart almost stopped. It was him, Daniel. That same man who hours before had injured me at the market, now called as if nothing had happened. I was speechless for a few seconds. He insisted more quietly, "I need to see you." I should have hung up. I should have said no and moved on. But who said love listens to reason? I simply replied, "Tomorrow at 8. I hung up and felt my body tremble. The night was long. The entire past felt alive again. I remembered when he would write me secret notes, when he would say the world was too small to contain what he felt. I remembered the first time he called me my love, and the fear that came right after. Now he wanted to see me after everything. The next day I made coffee, put on the same jacket from years ago, and waited. Every minute felt like a century. When the clock struck 8:15, I thought he wouldn't come, but he did. He knocked on the door slowly, as if asking permission to go back in time. I opened it. He looked different, thinner, more serious, with dark circles under his eyes. "Can I come in?" he asked. I nodded, and in that instant, everything inside me mixed together: love, resentment, longing, and fear. We sat across from each other. He tried to smile, but it broke in half. "I shouldn't have said that," he murmured. "But I panicked. I saw you there, and everyone was watching. I felt ashamed, angry at myself, and I took it out on you." I remained silent. The anger still burned, But beneath it was something stronger, the desire to understand. "You've changed," I said. "Everyone changes," he replied, looking at the floor. "But there are things that never leave us. I still remember the smell of your skin, your hands, the way you slept facing the wall, and I would rest my face against your back." His words shattered me. For a second, everything felt the same. Time didn't exist. He stood up, came closer, and touched my face. That touch. It was like opening an old wound. "Why did you come back?" I asked. "Because I can't forget you. Not even after so long, not even after trying to be another man." "And the one who humiliated me yesterday?" I asked in a trembling voice. "It was the same one who still loves you, but doesn't know how to deal with it." The silence that followed said more than any excuse. I knew him well. I knew that reunion wouldn't be easy. And that's when I noticed something different. He was looking at the door, restless, as if he was waiting for someone. "Does anyone else know you came here?" I asked. He hesitated. "Yes, but not in the way you think." The sound of a car stopping in front of the house interrupted everything. He turned pale. "Daniel, what is this?" I asked, but he just whispered, "Don't open the door." Fear filled the room. The clock seemed to tick louder, and for a moment I was once again the same man who had once loved in secret, fleeing the judgment of the world. The difference was that now the danger wasn't the prejudice outside. It was something inside him, something he was hiding. And it was at that very moment, with shallow breath and racing heart, that I realized the reunion at the market was just the beginning. What was to come would still test me in a way I'd never experienced before. If you've made it this far, I want you to tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. Would you have let him in after everything that happened, or would you have closed the door forever? Write below, "I would let you in if you believe that love still deserves a chance," or "I would close the door if you think that certain wounds should not be reopened." These words seem simple, but they help me understand how much the heart of those who hear me still believes in forgiveness. Because from here on, what was behind that door completely changed the course of my life. The car stopped in front of the house, the engine roaring as if waiting for my mistake. Daniel walked to the window, looked behind the curtain, and went white. His hand trembled. I'd seen that tremor many times. It was the same one he'd seen when he'd told me he loved me, and right after was afraid of the world. "Don't open it," he whispered. And his whisper wasn't an order. It was a cry for help. The doorbell rang. Once, twice, 3 times. I felt my skin crawl, my heart race. The old feeling of living in hiding returned. Only now I was no longer a silent man. I was an older man, brave enough to choose. "Who is it?" I asked without opening the door. Silence answered first, then a dull knock. Daniel closed his eyes. "It's Marcelo." The name fell to the living room floor. "Your boyfriend?" I asked softly. He shook his head. "My boss, and my sister's fiancé." The world spun a little askew. The doorbell rang again, louder. "Daniel, I know you're there. We need to talk now." The voice held an icy control, the kind of tone that doesn't argue, it threatens. I took a deep breath and, without making a sound, led Daniel to the kitchen. "Back exit," I said, pointing. He hesitated, and in that second I understood everything that was being said. He was trapped in a maze of secrecy, guilt, and fear. "Trust me," I said. I put a coat on him, stuffed the keys in my pocket, and we walked out into the narrow hallway that led to the alley. The smell of stale rain and fresh garbage hit my face, and my body, despite its age, ran faster than it had in a long time. Adrenaline has a way of removing wrinkles from your breath. The engine in front of the house was still roaring. The alley, no, movie-like silence. I hailed a taxi through the app, my hand trembling. When the car arrived, I shoved Daniel into the back seat. "Hurry up!" The driver glanced in the rearview mirror curiously. "Where to?" I named an old hotel near the beach, one Daniel and I knew well. "There." The city passed by as if late for the day itself. Outside, stores were opening, people were rushing, car horns honking. Inside, only the sound of our breathing. "Does he hurt you?" I asked. Daniel bit his lower lip and didn't answer. "Does he know about me?" I persisted. He nodded. "He does. He saw me at the market, and he knows about us, about what we once were." I remained silent. Part of me hurt. Another part was on alert. "Why did you say that to me?" The question came out without rancor, but with truth. He leaned his head against the window, his eyes welling up. "Because he was after me. Because I'm a coward. Because I still love you, and loving you puts me in danger." We arrived at the hotel. The same long hallway, the same worn carpet, the same creaking elevator that always announced our arrival. At reception, a young man glanced over briefly and didn't ask any questions. I gave him a document, paid in advance, and we went upstairs. The door closed. Silence. My body remembered the path before my head. Daniel took off his coat, stood in the middle of the room, and took a deep breath, like someone returning from a long swim. I approached slowly. This wasn't the time for a speech. This was the time for presence. He rested his forehead on my shoulder. The scent of his hair, now slightly tobacco-scented, mingled with the cheap hotel soap. "I messed up," he said in a whisper. I hid again. I held his face in my hands and saw the boy he still was inside. Desire, fear, courage, and the will to choose. "You still have time." The kiss wasn't like something out of a movie. It was real, simple, hot, urgent, and tender, all at once. The kind of kiss that doesn't apologize for existing. I felt his mouth tremble, and for the first time in years my entire body remembered what it's like to be chosen. There was no rush. There was care. He slid his hand around the back of my neck. I wrapped mine around his waist. Two men. Two stories. The same fire trying to rekindle under the rain. When we stopped, the room seemed bigger. "We can't stay here forever," I said. He nodded, resting his head against my chest just like before. The word "before" burst from within. It was passion, it was memory, it was sex just as much as the heart can handle without breaking. And it was also alarm. His phone vibrated. 3 messages. From Marcelo. I saw the first line on the screen. "Come back now, or I'll talk to your family." Daniel stiffened. "He has a video," he confessed, "of the 2 of us, years ago, from when we came here." I closed my eyes for a second. I felt anger, an old anger at the dirty game of prejudice, using love as a weapon. "So that's it, blackmail." He nodded. "And it's not just me. He wants to silence you too. He wants us to destroy each other." I stood. Age teaches us that some wars are lost when you accept fighting with the enemy's weapon. "We're not going to play on his turf," I said. "We're going to shine the light on ours." Daniel looked at me blankly. "What?" I grabbed my phone, opened the camera, and positioned it horizontally. "The truth takes more work, but it sleeps better," I said, trying to smile. "If he wants to silence us with secrecy, we respond with our voices." Daniel took a deep breath. "Are you sure?" I was. Not out of bravado, but out of exhaustion from being held hostage. I pressed REC and said, looking into the lens, "My name is David. I'm an older man. I love men. I loved Daniel, and I'm not ashamed of it. What happened at the market was fear. Fear kills joy. But I won't let that erase my story." I stopped. I handed him the phone. Daniel looked at his own reflection and, for a moment, saw himself completely. "My name is Daniel. I was wrong. I was a coward. I still love David, and I won't be blackmailed for loving him." He finished, his voice firm. He pressed stop. We both remained silent, listening to our own hearts. The elevator creaked in the hallway. Footsteps. 2, 3. They stopped at the door. An envelope slid underneath, touching the carpet. Daniel looked at me. I bent down and picked it up. Inside, a photo. Him and me, years ago, at the same window, in the same afternoon light. On the back, 3 words written in pen. "Tomorrow at 10. And an address, the warehouse of the old workshop where Marcelo works. The threat was simple. Or this goes to the family. I felt the old flight instinct rise up in my body. But at the same time, a strange calm descended with it. When truth shifts, courage finds a chair. He wants us to go to him, Daniel said, clutching the photo. He wants us to beg. I looked out the window, saw the sea in the distance. I grew up learning that a real man swallows his tears. Today I know a real man swallows his fear and returns respect. We'll go, I replied, but not to beg, to end it. Daniel nodded, wiping his face with his sleeve. Together. Together. We spent the rest of the day devising a simple plan, befitting our age and strength. No violence, no traps. I called an old contact, Tobias, the market manager, a discreet man who'd seen too much to be surprised by love. I asked him to be on standby, to text me at 9:50 if he didn't hear from us. He agreed without question. Daniel erased the last traces. He blocked Marcelo, saved the video we recorded in 3 different places, and left a scheduled email. I, who've always enjoyed rituals, created my own. 2 cups of coffee, side by side, on the bedroom sideboard. Why? He asked. To remind you that love doesn't fit in threats, I replied. Night fell. The city lit its lamps, and inside, we lit ours. Without noise, without guilt, with desire and affection. I won't describe what doesn't need detail. 2 bodies that know each other, recognizing each other again. Simple, slow, true. It was passion, it was sex, it was love. And it was also the birth of a promise that our story would no longer be written in pencil. When he fell asleep with his head on my arm, I knew the next morning would be a journey. And that if life wants us to stand, courage must awaken before the sun. We woke early, simple clothes, hearts alert. He put the photo in his pocket. I put the video in mine and took a message to heart. No one has the right to turn our intimacy into a chain. We left the hotel under clear skies, the beach wind cutting our anxiety into small pieces. On the way, Daniel took my hand. If it goes wrong, he began. If it goes wrong, we'll start over again, I said. But shame won't get into the car this time. The workshop was in an old neighborhood, with narrow streets, graffitied walls, and the smell of oil. When we turned the corner, we saw Marcelo's car, dark, gleaming in the 9:55 sun. He was leaning against the door, arms crossed, the look on his face as if he were ruling over others' fears. We stopped about 10 paces away. He smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'm glad you came, he said. This will save work. I stepped forward. I, the man who has cried in an empty chapel and laid in a coffin so as not to leave love alone, stepped forward. My body knew what my soul had already decided. Our story would not end in a warehouse, and this is exactly where I need you with me. If you've experienced something similar, if you've ever been blackmailed for loving, if you've ever had to choose between secrecy and courage, tell me in the comments. Write, secrecy is no shelter if you believe love can't be used as a weapon, or I would choose the truth if you would enter this warehouse with me the way I did with my head held high. These words help this story reach other men who need to hear that desire, passion, respect, and freedom can walk hand in hand. Because what happens when we cross that door is what changes everything. The warehouse door creaked as we opened it, the sound echoing as if the entire place were breathing in bad memories. The smell of burnt oil and rust mixed with dust clung to my throat. Daniel walked a step forward, tense, as if he knew the past was about to take its toll. Marcelo was there, sitting on a bench with a lit cigarette and a cold smile. Punctual. How beautiful, he said, blowing the smoke aside. I closed the door behind us and remained silent. I've seen this kind of man before, the one who feeds on other people's fears. He looked at Daniel, then back at me. So that's it. The couple is back together? What a beautiful scene. For a video. Daniel lowered his head. I took a step forward. It's over, Marcelo. You no longer have any power over him. He laughed, a mocking laugh. Oh no? Want to bet? He took his phone out of his pocket and showed the screen. A folder full of videos, old photos, messages. Things only someone who truly loved would keep. One touch and it'll all be online. His sister, his work, his friends, and everyone will see it. Daniel's heart raced. Why are you doing this? I asked. Because he made me believe I could pretend to be normal. And you two remind me that I never will be. There was anger, but there was also envy. Marcelo didn't hate their love. He hated not having the courage to live his own. "You don't have to do this," I said, trying to control my tone. "You can delete everything now, and no one needs to get hurt." He shook his head slowly. "Oh, but it's already gone. I'm gone." The silence that followed was heavy. The wind rattled the broken windows, and the rustling of the tarp on the roof sounded like a rope being pulled taut. Daniel took a step forward. "Marcelo, please, this ends today. I can't hide anymore." Marcelo looked at him with disdain. "You've always hidden, even from me." And it was at that moment that the hatred slipped. He threw his cell phone at the wall and lunged at Daniel, pushing him against the counter. I reacted instinctively. I grabbed Marcelo by the shoulder and pushed him back. He staggered, tripped over an empty drum, and fell. The sound of the body on the floor made the world stop for 2 seconds. "Are you okay?" I asked Daniel. He nodded, panting. Marcelo, on the ground, laughed. "Look, the old man still has strength." He stood up, wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth. "You think you're better than me, is that it?" It wasn't a threat anymore, it was desperation. "You look at me like you've won, but you'll end up like me, alone." I took a deep breath. "No, Marcelo. Alone is the one who spends his life afraid of his own reflection." I grabbed his broken cell phone and threw it into a bucket of water. "It's over." He looked at us, surprised, but didn't move a muscle. He stood there, motionless, as if he no longer knew who he was without that power. Daniel took my hand. "Let's go." We walked slowly, without looking back. The sunlight outside was so bright it felt like another world. We walked in silence to the car, and only when we got in did I realize my hands were shaking. "How you think he'll—" Daniel began. "He won't do anything," I interrupted. "Now he'll have to look after himself." He rested his head on my shoulder, and the world seemed to slowly spin again. On the way, the radio played an old song, the kind we listened to when we still believed love was enough to conquer all. Daniel smiled slightly. "Remember that one?" I smiled too. How could I forget? He looked at me with a different kind of shine, not the shine of fear, but of courage. "I don't want to hide anymore," he said. "Neither do I," I replied. We arrived home with light hearts and tired bodies. Night fell like a relief. He lay down on the couch, and I sat beside him, watching his face in the dim light. "You know what's funny?" he said. "The man who threatened me never knew what true love was, and the man he tried to destroy it is still here." I held his hand and kissed it slowly. The kiss wasn't one of desperation, it was one of new beginnings. And it was there, in the silence of the room, that my body remembered once again what it means to have a home, and my heart, what it means to have peace. But peace never comes alone. Days later I received an anonymous message. I saw the video. My blood ran cold. The number had no name, just a link. I showed it to Daniel. He went pale. "Did he—" I shook my head. "I don't know." My heart pounded, fear creeping back through the cracks in the security we thought we had. Daniel clicked. The video opened, but it wasn't what we expected. It was the video we recorded ourselves in the hotel, confessing everything. And in the comments, something I never thought I'd read. Support. Beautiful, simple, human words. Courage. Love is love. You made me cry. I went through that too. It turned into a sea of people who understood what we'd been through in silence our whole lives. Daniel started to cry, but this time it was pure tears. We didn't hide, we existed. I hugged him tightly. And now no one can erase that. It was at that moment that I realized that fear changes form, but love changes the world. The phone rang again. It was Tobias, the friend from the grocery store. "Have you seen what they're saying about you? Everyone's talking. You've made news. And good news." I laughed, tears still in my eyes. That's all we needed. 2 old people making news for loving each other. Daniel laid his head in my lap, laughing too. 2 old men, nothing. 2 survivors. I ran my hand through his hair and felt the weight of the years transform into lightness. Love, when it's true, always finds a way to resurface, even after sinking 1,000 times. But I knew there was still something to resolve. Marcelo hadn't shown up, hadn't texted, nothing. And silence like that, coming from someone like him, was never peace. It was a premonition. As the day dawned, Daniel slept peacefully. I stared at my phone, at the sea of new messages, the comments, the faces of strangers calling us brave. Deep inside I knew love had finally emerged from the shadows. But the world never sleeps for long. And what came after that dawn was what no one expected. If you've made it this far, I want you to write one word in the comments. Courage. Because it's what saved us. And maybe now it'll save someone else who's listening to this story in silence. That night was unlike any other. Daniel appeared again, unannounced, knocking on the door as if he already knew he would be welcomed. I should have hesitated, but I didn't. The heart sometimes prevails over reason, and before I knew it, I was already opening the door. He walked in, wet from the rain, his hair messy, his eyes tired. He looked like a man who had struggled with his own destiny. I asked him what was wrong, but he didn't answer. He just took off his coat, let it fall to the floor, and looked at me with that look that has always disarmed me. The air grew heavy, as if the entire past had come flooding back into the house. I tried to say something, anything, but he silenced me with a kiss. A quick, urgent kiss, like someone trying to prove they're alive. I should have pulled away. I should have remembered the market, the cruel words, the shame he'd made me feel. But the body has memories, and mine reminded me all too much of his. It was the same taste, the same heat, the same ancient rush of someone who loves and hates each other in equal measure. The rain was beating down outside, and before I knew it, we were both in the living room, breathing heavily, as if time had erased the space between the end and that moment. I pushed him against the wall, he pulled me back, and suddenly there was no right or wrong, just two men trying to understand if love could still survive what had become a wound. But what began as desire soon became a confession. After minutes of silence and heavy breathing, he rested his forehead against mine and whispered, "I've never stopped thinking about you, not even when I tried to be another man." The words pierced me. I wanted to believe him, but at the same time, I was afraid. Afraid it was just guilt. Afraid he'd returned only because time had taken its toll on what he'd run away from feeling. He sat on the couch, ran his hands over his face and began to speak. He said he was married, that he'd tried to build a new life, that the woman he was living with knew something was wrong, something he couldn't erase. She always knew there was someone before anything, he said. I gasped. It was as if I were the ghost inside his house. Why did you come back then? I asked. He took a deep breath. Because the guilt won't let me sleep, and because yesterday when I saw you I realized I'm still the same coward who left you. We sat in silence. The light flickered. Outside, thunder boomed, and I swear for a second I thought about sending him away. But he stood up, hugged me, and the embrace was so genuine that my body gave in. Longing is treacherous. Sometimes it feels like affection, but it's just pain in disguise. That embrace became a bed, and the bed became a reunion that mixed regret, desire, and anger. I looked at him and saw the same man as before, but with the weight of years on his shoulders. He was trembling, I don't know if from the cold or fear. I ran my hand over his face and said, "Time doesn't forgive, but it doesn't erase either." He replied softly, "I know. I just want to remember what it was like." The rest of the night was a tangle of memories and suppressed moans. It was as if we were trying to relive a love the world had forbidden, and in the midst of it all, between kisses and tears, he said, "If I could go back, I would have stayed." I wanted to believe him. I wanted so badly to believe him. But a part of me knew that when the sun rose, maybe he would leave again. When I woke up, he was still there, lying there, staring at the ceiling, as if trying to remember the moment. "I don't know what I'm going to tell her," he confessed. And I replied, "Tell the truth. That you spent the night with the man you tried to forget." He smiled sadly. "She wouldn't understand." I shrugged. "Not even the world understands it yet." He got up and dressed in silence. Before leaving, he stopped at the door and looked at me one last time. "Can I come back?" I didn't answer. I just looked back. He understood what I couldn't say. For the next few days, silence was my only companion. I wondered what he felt, if he regretted it, if he would return, until an envelope appeared under my door. Inside, a handwritten letter. The handwriting was his. I loved you in the wrong way, at the wrong time, but it was love nonetheless. If I never see you again, I want you to know that I never forgot you. I read the letter so many times that I memorized every line, and the more I read, the more I realized that no matter how hard he tried, fear still ruled. I knew that love was like a wound that heals on the outside, but continues to ache on the inside. But fate hadn't finished what it started. 3 days later, a car pulled up in front of my house. It was her, Daniel's wife. Brown hair, a hard look in her eyes, a firm step. She knocked hard on the door. I opened it. She held the letter in her hands. "Was it you?" she asked. I remained silent. She lifted the paper, her face tense. "He told me everything." The air seemed to drain away. I tried to answer, but she wouldn't let me. "He still loves you, and I won't be the punishment of a divided man." She took a deep breath, her eyes welling up. "But he's in a bad way. He disappeared." My heart raced. "What do you mean he disappeared?" She replied, "He left last night. He said he needed to talk to you about something. He hasn't been back." I felt the ground disappear. I looked out the window, her car still running, its lights on. Outside, the wind howled as if announcing something. I grabbed my coat and left without thinking. She called my name, but I was already running down the street. The city seemed silent, and all I wanted was to find him, to understand what was happening. The letter was still in my pocket, crumpled. The words seemed to pulse. "If I never see you again." That wasn't just regret, it was a warning. And it was with this thought that I left in the early hours of the morning, guided only by his memory and the certainty that something much bigger was about to happen. If you've made it this far, tell me in the comments, what would you do if the love of your life disappeared right after you met again? Write, "I would search until the end," because perhaps, like me, you also understand that certain loves don't end, they just change form. And it is precisely from this point between fear and mystery that everything begins to reveal itself. The dawn seemed endless. I walked the wet streets unsure of where to go, just following my instinct, the same instinct that always led me to him. The streetlights flickered and every shadow seemed to hide a piece of what I didn't want to believe. Daniel had disappeared. His wife said he'd gone looking for me, and it ate at me. Part of me felt guilty. Another part wanted to understand what had made him disappear. I walked over to the cafe where we'd met when we were younger. The door was closed, but the owner, who'd known me for years, was still inside, wiping down the counter. I knocked on the window, and he opened the door, half asleep. "David, what are you doing here at this hour?" I took a deep breath. "Have you seen Daniel around here?" He paused briefly, thought, then replied, "Yes, I have. About 2 hours ago. He was acting strange. He ordered a coffee, sat there staring into space, and when I went to close the door, he left an envelope on the table." My heart raced. "Do you still have that envelope?" He looked at me curiously, opened the counter drawer and took out a small yellowed envelope. I thought he'd come back for it. I took it in my hands, and the paper trembled along with me. The name on the front was mine, written in his handwriting. I left without a word and sat on the bench in the square in front of the cafe. The sound of the rain slowly returned, and I opened the envelope. Inside was a photo of us, old, from the days when we could still laugh without fear, and a short note. "If I don't come back, it's because the past won't let me go. Find me where it all began." It took me a moment to understand. Where it all began. My heart took me straight to the beach where we had our first kiss 30 years ago. It was far away, but I went. I got in the car and drove with sweaty hands and teary eyes. The wind was strong, and the road felt like a tunnel of memories. Every kilometer was a vivid memory. The touch, the fights, the fear, the love. When I arrived, day was already breaking. The beach was deserted, only the sound of the waves breaking the silence. And there, near the rocks, I saw something that made the world stop. His coat, The same coat he'd been wearing when he'd shown up at my house was thrown on the sand, soaked. I ran, shouted his name, but only the sea responded. The tide was rising, and so was my desperation. I entered the water without thinking, calling, searching, as if I could pluck him from the waves with the strength of the love that still existed. After a while, exhausted, I fell to my knees in the sand. That's when I noticed something floating near the rocks, a notebook. I picked it up. It was the same one he used to write in when we still lived together. The pages were wet, but I could read part of it, and the writing gave me goosebumps. It's not the sea that scares me, it's the emptiness that comes after. If love can't be experienced on dry land, perhaps it needs another way to exist. For a moment I thought he'd killed himself, but doubt soon replaced certainty. The body was gone. Nothing but the coat and notebook. And then I noticed something at the bottom of the page, an address hastily scrawled. It was the same neighborhood where he'd had an art studio years ago, a place he'd sworn never to return. I got back in the car, my heart racing. The city was still waking up when I arrived. The gate was locked, but the light was on. I pushed and the wood gave way. The studio smelled of paint and mildew, and in the center was a canvas covered by a sheet. I pulled back the cloth, and what I saw took my breath away. It was a painting, our portrait. But no ordinary portrait. Daniel had painted the two of us, aged, sitting side by side, holding hands. Behind us, the sea. And at the bottom a phrase, "Even if the world erases us, love paints us anew." Emotion choked me. It was then that I realized he hadn't run away. He was trying to say goodbye in another way. A sound pulled me from my thoughts. Footsteps behind me. I turned quickly, and there he was, alive, drenched, his eyes red, his body trembling. "Why did you do that?" I asked. He took a deep breath. "Because I needed to know if you would still come for me. If love still had the courage to seek me out." Anger and relief mingled. "You made me believe you were dead, Daniel." He approached slowly. "I died. A little. Since the day I left you." The silence that followed was louder than any scream. He touched my face, and I couldn't resist. The kiss came again, only this time without guilt, without fear. It was the kiss of someone who had faced everything, time, prejudice, regret, and was still there. We sat on the floor, both of us wet, laughing and crying at the same time. He took the notebook and said, "I thought if the world didn't want us, I could create another one, painted, invented, just ours." "And now?" I asked. He looked at me as if he finally understood what he'd always been searching for. "Now we live however we can. No hiding, no excuses." And it was in that old studio, among paints and souvenirs, that love found a way to be reborn. It wasn't the love of the young. It was the love of those who survived, the love of those who had been beaten down by life, but still had the strength to hold each other's hands and say, "We're here." But the world, as always, doesn't forgive love that persists. And it was when his phone rang that I realized the story wasn't over yet. He answered, and his expression changed. He turned pale. I heard a voice on the other end, a voice that chilled my blood. "Do you think you can escape the past? The truth always comes out." Daniel dropped the phone and looked at me, startled. "It's him," he whispered, "the man who reported us years ago." Fear returned to occupy the space that love had just conquered. And it was there, between the sound of the rain and the distant ringing of the phone still vibrating on the ground, that I realized that story, which seemed to finally find peace, was about to turn into something much bigger and much more dangerous. If you've made it this far, tell me in the comments. Love always comes back. Because sometimes it's only when the past knocks on the door again that we discover if love is a memory or destiny. The phone's ringing was still echoing on the floor when Daniel pulled me by the arm and said, his eyes wide, "We need to get out of here now." I didn't understand right away. The wind was beating against the studio windows, and the painting was still dripping with paint, as if love itself were melting before our eyes. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to remain calm. He took a deep breath, looked at the door, and replied, "A man I should have forgotten long ago." We left in a hurry. The street was wet. The dawn was almost breaking, and the smell of the sea mixed with fear made the air heavy. We got in the car, and he drove without saying a word, his hands trembling on the steering wheel. "Are you going to tell me what's going on?" I asked. He looked away from the road and replied quietly, "Remember that time I disappeared? Before you knew I was married?" I nodded. "That's right. I didn't disappear for nothing. I was blackmailed." His words hit me like a blow. "Blackmailed by who?" He hesitated, glanced in the rearview mirror and said, "By a man I had an affair with when we were still together. He found out about us. He said that if I didn't disappear, he'd show pictures of us to everyone, my family, my colleagues, the church. I panicked, and to protect you, I ran away." For a moment I couldn't answer. It was anger, it was pity, it was love, mixed with an old pain that was pulsing again. "What now?" I asked. "Now he wants money. He said if I don't pay, he'll come after me and you." The silence inside the car turned into a deafening noise. The city lights flashed past the window like flashes of a past we were trying to hide. "Do you have any idea what you're saying, Daniel? This could ruin our lives." He laughed nervously. "Our lives are already over once, and I'm not going to let them ruin them again." We arrived at my house while the sun was still rising. He walked in and went straight to the window, looking out at the street. "He's following me, I'm sure of it," he said. "Someone's watching." I looked too, but saw nothing. Even so, I closed the curtains and locked the door. The atmosphere was warlike, but there was something else, something I couldn't ignore. The tension between us was almost physical. He turned slowly, and in that tired gaze, there was still the same desire as before. "Do you still love me?" he asked. The question came as a whisper but weighed like a scream. I didn't answer. He leaned closer, placed his hand on my face, and everything that was fear turned to heat. The kiss happened unplanned, as if my body remembered the path my heart pretended to have forgotten. It was a kiss of reunion, of anger, of longing, of a promise broken and renewed in the same instant. Clothes fell to the floor as dawn became our accomplice once again. His body still tasted like mine. It was as if time had simply paused, and now finally someone pressed play. For a few minutes, the entire world disappeared. There was no guilt, no threat, no past. Just the two of us. But paradise never lasts long. The sound of a loud knock on the door jolted us from it. 3 sharp, insistent knocks. Daniel went pale. "It's him," he whispered. I quickly pulled on my pants and went to the door, but before I could say anything, it burst open. A tall man in a dark suit with an icy gaze entered. "You think you can fool me?" he said, staring at Daniel. "Get out of my house now," I yelled. The man laughed, walked slowly to the middle of the room and threw something on the table. It was an envelope. Inside, photos, old photos, Daniel and I together, lying down, smiling, embracing. He looked at me desperately. "He has everything," he murmured. The man approached, crossed his arms and said, "You know what I want." Daniel lowered his head. "I'll pay," he replied, "but don't touch him." The man laughed. "Ah, Daniel, you're still the same fool you always were. That little love of yours is your weakness, and that's why I never lose." Before he could say anything else, Daniel stepped forward. It was quick. A shove, a brief struggle, and the man fell onto the table. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the house. "Run!" Daniel shouted. But I couldn't move. I was paralyzed between fear and shock. The man stood up, his face drawn, his eyes filled with hatred. "You'll regret this," he said, and slammed the door behind him. The silence that followed was too heavy. Daniel leaned against the wall, panting. "Are you okay?" I asked. He nodded, but his hands were shaking. "This isn't going to stop here, David. He'll be back." That night changed everything. There was no turning back, no hiding. I knew the love between us had always been dangerous, but now it had literally become a matter of survival. And in the midst of all that confusion, I realized something even more frightening. Part of me was alive again. Fear made my heart beat, but love kept it going. The following days were a mix of passion and paranoia. With every step on the street, I thought someone was watching us. With every stopped car, my chest tightened. Daniel slept little, waking suddenly as if the past were knocking on the window. But even with all this, there were moments when we forgot. Moments when the touch felt like home again. One night he was painting in his room. The smell of paint was strong. I went over to him and asked what he was doing. He replied, without looking at me, "Painting fear, to see if it will let me." I approached and saw the painting, two bodies intertwined in the dark, surrounded by shadows, but there was a point of light in the middle, a burning heart. "Is that us?" I asked. He smirked. "Yes, it always has been." The man in the grey suit, dark grey suit, I touched his shoulder, and when he turned, the desire returned. It was a slow, intense kiss, the kind that erases all thought. We made love right there, on the paint-stained floor, and for a moment, all that existed was the sound of our breath mingling. But the calm never lasts. As he fell asleep, the phone rang again, the same unknown number. I answered, and the voice on the other end simply said, "I told you so. It's too late now." I looked out the window and saw headlights stopping across the street. 3 men in a car. I stood still, my heart pounding. The next night wouldn't just be about love, it would be about escape, danger, and a truth I hadn't yet known. If you've made it this far, I want you to write in the comments, "Love is courage," because from here on, what was about to happen between me, Daniel, and that man would change everything you imagine about what it means to love someone, how far fear can go when love is at stake. The light from the car parked across the street filtered through the cracks in the curtains, drawing lines of fear on the walls. I still held the phone, silent, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it was about to burst from my chest. Daniel woke with a start. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "They're outside," I replied, the words coming out low, almost breathless. He jumped to his feet, went to the window, and looked out. 3 silhouettes. One of them lit a cigarette, the orange glow reflecting off the glass. "There's no point in running," he said, and for the first time I saw true terror in his eyes. "Who are they?" I asked. He hesitated. "Men who know too much, and want even more." The tension was so thick I could smell the fear in the air. I reached for my car keys, but he grabbed my wrist. "If we leave now, they'll follow. We have to deceive them." As he spoke, I heard the front doorknob click. Someone was testing the door. We ran to the bedroom. Daniel grabbed a backpack from under the bed. It was packed and full. "Did you already know this could happen?" I whispered. He simply replied, "I knew it was only a matter of time." The confession hurt more than the danger. He lived with the fear sleeping beside him, and I didn't even notice. We jumped out the back window, straight into the alley. The light rain hid our steps. We ran to the end of the street and grabbed the neighbor's old car, which he fixed occasionally. "Where are you taking us?" I asked. He replied without looking, "To a place no one remembers anymore." We drove for hours. The deserted road, the sound of tires on water, the grey sky, it all felt like a scene from a never-ending movie. We stopped at an abandoned warehouse near the beach. The wind bit our faces, and the sea roared in the background. "Here?" I asked doubtfully. He nodded. "This is where I hid the rest of the photos, the originals. He thinks he has them all, but he doesn't." We went inside. The floor was covered in sand and pieces of wood. Daniel turned on a flashlight. In the corner, a metal box covered with a cloth. He knelt and opened it. Inside, a stack of negatives, an envelope, and an old photo of us. I was smiling. He was hugging me from behind. "This is all that's left of us," he said, his voice cracking. I knelt beside him. The memory of those nights came back like a flash, his body warm against mine, the sound of his breath, the taste of promise. He turned to me and said, "I should have protected this, protected you." I touched his face. "We still can." The kiss came with force, with desperation, with everything time had stolen. It was the kind of kiss that makes the whole world disappear, and for a few minutes the cold warehouse became the same warm room it had been years ago. Clothes were lost in the sand and silence, and what happened there wasn't just desire. It was a way of reminding us that we were still alive. Afterwards, as we lay on the floor, the sound of the sea sounded like our hearts beating again. He held my hand and said, "If anything happens to me, take this box and burn it. Promise?" I shook my head. "I won't lose you again." But he insisted. "Promise." I couldn't answer. It was then that we heard the roar of an engine. Someone had followed us. Daniel stood up quickly, grabbed his flashlight and turned it off. The car's headlights outside illuminated the warehouse for a few seconds, then went dark again. "They've found us," he said, and pulled me behind the columns. The sound of footsteps approached, wet, slow. 3 shadows entered. "I know you're in there," a familiar voice shouted. It was the same man from the night before. "The escape is over, Daniel. Either you give me what I want, or I'll finish him off." Daniel looked at me, and it was a look that said it all. "Stay here," he whispered and stood up. "I'll figure this out." I tried to hold him back, but he pulled away. The flashlight flickered, and when it came back on, the two of them were face to face, Daniel and the man. "You're not touching him," Daniel said. The other man laughed, pulling a gun from his coat. "You don't understand, Daniel. This was never about love. It was about power, and the power is mine now." The sound of the gunshot split the air like thunder. One, then another. I ran, stumbling, screaming his name. The smoke from the shot was still floating when I found Daniel's body lying on the ground. Blood, sand, and silence. The man fled before I reached him. I knelt, holding his head in my lap. "Don't say anything," I begged, but he smiled weakly. "At least this time I didn't run away." The words came out like a breath. I felt the warmth of his hand slowly fading, the same hand that once held me in the middle of the night and made me believe that love, even hidden, could be real. The sea roared outside, and I knew the world wasn't going to stop. No matter what, I had a promise to keep. I grabbed the box, slammed it shut, and walked out, my heart in pieces. On the way back, the sun began to rise, turning everything red. Red like love, red like guilt, red like what was left between us. If you've made it this far, write in the comments. I would have stayed until the end, because sometimes that's what love is. A story that ends too late to forget and too soon to tell. And that's exactly where what comes next will begin. I left the warehouse without looking back. The rain fell thinly, coldly, and each drop seemed to remind me of what I had just lost. Daniel stood inside motionless, with the same serene expression of someone who, until the last second, still believed he could fix the world. I walked like a ghost down the deserted road, the metal box clutched to my chest. It was the last piece of him I had left. The box trembled in my hands, not from the weight of the iron, but from the weight of the promise. Their car was gone, but the sound of the gunshots still echoed in my head. I could see the face of the man who had shot them, cold, empty, almost satisfied. There was something personal in that hatred, and deep down, I knew. It wasn't over. Daniel might be dead, but his story still lived on inside that box. I arrived home in the early hours of the morning. The clock read 4:42. I threw my wet coat on the floor and sat on the sofa. The smell of gunpowder still clung to my clothes, mixed with the salt of the sea. I opened the box, and inside, among the negatives and photos, was something I hadn't seen before. A folded letter with my name handwritten on it. The handwriting was his. "If you're reading this, it's because the worst has happened," it began. "And if it happened, it's because I couldn't escape myself." The words gripped me as if time had stopped. Daniel explained that years before, when we were still together, he had gotten involved with dangerous people. Men who used others' fears to gain power. And one of those people was the man I saw in the warehouse. He owed money, secrets, favors, and the most valuable secret was me. "They know who you are," the letter said, "and they know what I would do for you. That's why, if anything happens to me, you need to disappear. Don't burn the box yet. Give it to someone who still believes in the truth." I folded the letter, my hands shaking. The house seemed to breathe with me. The sound of the walls creaking, the wind rushing through the cracks, the world spinning without asking me if I wanted to stay in it. At the bottom of the box was a flash drive. I plugged it into my computer, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Photos, videos, documents, evidence that Daniel had been blackmailed for years. Powerful men, familiar faces, all using fear as currency. And among them a photo of him and me taken in secret. I recognized the night, the room, the sheets. It was our purest secret. transformed into a threat. My first impulse was to destroy everything, but anger won out. They killed the man I loved and still wanted to erase what he tried to protect. No, I wouldn't allow it. I spent the entire night watching every image, listening to every audio, trying to understand the scale of the network he faced alone. And when the sun rose, I knew what I had to do. I got in my car and drove to the cafe where it all began, the same one where he used to laugh at my antics and steal sugar to carry in his pocket. The waiter, the same one from years ago, recognized me. "It's been a while, huh?" he said. I smiled awkwardly and sat at the table in the back. I placed the box on the table and ordered 2 coffees, one for me, one for him. As steam rose from the cups, a man approached. Grey suit, impassive face, the same look from the cemetery. Cold, calculated. "You should have kept quiet," he said, pulling out a chair and sitting down without asking. "Daniel was good, but he got mixed up where he shouldn't have been. Don't make the same mistake." I looked at him, trying to sound calmer than I felt. "You took everything from him, but you forgot that sometimes love is more dangerous than hate." He smirked. "And what are you going to do? Post the photos, report it? No one will believe a bitter old man missing his lover." It was at that moment that I realized he didn't know about the letter. "Maybe you don't have to believe me," I replied. "Just have someone read what he left." He frowned. "What did he leave?" But before I could react, the barista appeared. "Everything okay here?" he asked. I smiled and waved, leaving a small backpack on the floor. Inside was a copy of everything: photos, videos, names, everything programmed to be sent to the press if anything happened to me. The man stood up slowly. "You don't know who you're messing with." "Yes, I do," I replied, "with people who are afraid of the truth. And fear is the beginning of the end." He left the cafe without looking back. I stood there, sipping my cold coffee and staring at the empty chair in front of me. I pictured Daniel there, smiling with that sweet irony that melted me. As I got up to leave, I noticed a piece of paper tucked under the box. It was a hotel receipt dated 2 days before his death, and a handwritten number, 207. Hope, stubborn, was rekindled. If he'd left me alone, it was for a reason. I got in the car and went straight to the address. The hotel was old, tucked away on a side street, the kind of place where no one asks questions. I asked for the key to room 207, saying it belonged to a friend who'd forgotten something there. The sleepy receptionist handed it to me without hesitation. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step beating like a drum in my chest. When I opened the door, the smell invaded me, the same perfume he wore, mixed with sea air and cigarettes. On the nightstand, a photo of us, and behind it, an envelope with the stamp still intact. "If you've made it this far," the first line said, "it's because you haven't given up on me." My heart raced. He knew I was coming. He always knew. If you're listening to me now, comment below. I wouldn't have given up, because sometimes life puts before us loves that test the limits of courage, and what I discovered inside that envelope would change everything. Inside the envelope was a small antique iron key and a short, hastily written note. "Please don't hate me. There is something you need to see before you decide what to do with what is left of me." The note ended with a scribbled coordinate, numbers that seemed meaningless, but I knew it was an address. Daniel always liked to hide messages in detail. I grabbed my phone and typed in the coordinates. The map showed a road by the sea, near an abandoned house where, many years ago, we used to go to escape the world. The same house where he first told me he loved me. I drove there without thinking. The wind whipped against the car, and the sea roared as if it knew something was about to happen. When I arrived, the house was as it had been before, old, overgrown, with a rusty gate. I entered slowly. The floor creaked. The air smelled of mold and memories. In the middle of the living room, a wooden suitcase awaited me. The key fit perfectly. Upon opening it, I found more than I expected. Inside were photos, documents, and a recording. I picked up the recorder and pressed play. His voice filled the room, husky, tired, but still his. "If you're listening to this, it's because you finally had the courage to forgive me, or at least to try. I left everything I know here, the names, the places, the faces, the people who used me, and also the ones who saved me. But first and foremost, I want you to know that what I did, as wrong as it seems, was to protect you. They threatened to destroy you if I didn't cooperate. And I gave in. I sold what little dignity I had left to keep your name clean. I messed up, I know, but I never stopped loving you, not for a second. The words echoed inside me like waves crashing against a rock. I sat on the floor, trying to understand where guilt ended and love began. In the recording, he revealed details I never imagined. That one of the men involved was a famous politician, the same one who today gives speeches about family and morality. That he had been forced to record fake videos, to make up stories, all to divert attention from the real culprits. And that, when he tried to leave, they threatened him with the thing he cared most about, me. Through tears and heavy breathing, he said, "If I disappear, promise me one thing. Don't live in hiding. Tell our story. Let the world hear it, even if it's just to make fun of you. At least they'll know we exist." The tape ended with a dry click. I stood there, tape recorder in hand, staring into space. Outside, the sun was beginning to rise, and for the first time in years, I felt my fear disappear along with the night. I held proof of everything. But more than that, I had his final request. Suddenly, a noise outside snapped me out of my trance. Footsteps, quick, steady. Someone was there. I closed my suitcase and hid behind the door. The sound grew closer until the door slowly opened. It was the man from the cafe, the same grey suit, the same cold gaze. "I knew you would come here," he said, smirking. "Then I knew I would find the truth," I replied. He took a step forward. "The truth is dangerous, David, especially when it involves powerful people. And so is love," I said firmly. "And ours is what will destroy you." He pulled out a gun, pointing it straight at my chest. "You're stubborn. You should have left the dead alone." "I tried," I murmured, "but they won't let me." The click of the trigger was the loudest sound in the house. I closed my eyes, but the shot didn't come. When I opened them, the man was on the ground. Behind him, a woman clutched a piece of iron, panting. It was the lady from the cemetery, the one who told me that love only changes addresses. "It took me a while to understand that he was not the only one who loved you," she said, dropping the barbell on the floor. "Daniel came to me before he died. He asked me to protect you if anything happened." The silence fell heavily. I knelt, my heart racing. "Who are you, anyway?" "Someone who also lost everything because of the wrong kind of love, and who decided not to let history repeat itself." She pointed to the suitcase. "Take this. Publish it. Show what he tried to hide. He believed you were the only one capable of bearing the consequences." We left together. The sea crashed hard against the rocks, and the wind seemed to carry his name among the waves. When I looked back, the house began to collapse, as if completing a cycle. The wood creaked, the walls crumbled, and the tape I'd left on the floor was crumbling along with time. Back in the car, the lady looked at me and said, "He loved you so much that even death became a way to save you." I took a deep breath. "Then let it be in life that I avenge him." I spent the next few days organizing everything, the evidence, the photos, the audio. I sent it all to a journalist I knew wouldn't be afraid to publish it. And when the report came out, the whole country knew his name. Daniel, the man who died trying to expose the price of silence. That night I lit a candle in the window like I did when I waited for him to come home, and I swear for a moment I smelled him on the wind, the same scent, the same peace. I closed my eyes and heard, almost like a whisper, "Now they know." And it was there that I realized. The love that the world tried to bury had finally been reborn in the most dangerous and beautiful way possible. By being seen. If you've made it this far, then you're part of this story. And that means it touched you in some way. Maybe because you've already experienced something similar. Maybe because you still believe that love deserves to be told, even when the world tries to silence it. So, before I leave, I want to ask you for 3 simple things that make all the difference. First, if you felt something listening to this story, leave your like now, because that's what shows YouTube that real stories about love, courage, and redemption still matter. Second, comment below the phrase, "They know it's the symbol of those who understand that love, when it's real, survives time, fear, and even death." Write this so that more people can find courage in their own pain. And third, subscribe to the channel. This way you won't miss the next stories. Each one was made to move you, to make you think, and to remind you that it's never too late to feel again. Oh, so now that the video is over, it doesn't come out yet. The next video is already appearing on the screen. It's the natural continuation of this conversation. Click on it and stay with me, because what comes next will make you look at love and yourself in a way you may never have before.